speaking. Thank you so much to the Kurdish Policy Research Council. I am absolutely profoundly honored and humbled to be here. And I have to say, as a Jew, that the history of your people, the Kurdish people, is almost synonymous with the history of the Jewish people. And your people's struggle is my people's struggle. And I am very, very disappointed in what could have been a robust initiative by the United States. And it appears that Americans, and vis-a-vis Syria, I should say that part of the problem with Syria is that we broke it. I'm sure all of you remember the famous line of President Barack Obama on August 20th, 2012 about chemical weapons, the red line, that if he sees chemical weapons being moved around, that is when we will spring to action. And it was exactly 1 year and to the day later, on August 21st, 2013, that there was that brutal attack in Ghouta, and our television screens were haunted by the visages of children trembling with no outer manifestation of bruises and, convulsing from pain. And there had obviously been a chemical weapons attack. And I think part of the problem in America is that we are constantly being haunted by the specter of the last war that we fought. And it blinds us to the current realities and to the current emerging threats. In March of this year, President Donald Trump, haunted by the specters of the war in Iraq and the one that we are currently executing in Afghanistan, was explicit in his demand to get out of Syria as soon as possible, saying, quote, "We're knocking the hell out of ISIS. We'll be coming out of Syria soon. Let the people take care of it now. We are going to get back to our country where we belong, where we want to be." Now, implicit in this message are two major fallacies. One, that the only reason at all to be in Syria was to defeat ISIS, and two, that we had defeated ISIS by ourselves. The first fallacy completely ignores the geostrategic reality of Syria today, which I've often described as a multi-layered Pyrex or plexiglass chessboard, where there are Iranian as well as Turkish and Russian forces on the march. I believe very profoundly that nature abhors a vacuum, and that when America is not there to defend our interests and to create a sense of moral clarity, all of the most venal and nefarious elements on the world stage immediately swoop in to fill a void. Even if we were to remain in Syria, remarks such as these send a dangerous rhetorical green light to those venal actors. And you all know those actors include the mullahs of Iran, the hostile forces of Erdogan's brutish and tyrannical regime in Turkey, and Vladimir Putin, who would like to flex his muscles and emerge as a leader in the world stage, and to resuscitate Russia as a world superpower, and resurrect the Cold War. The second fallacy in the remark, as I said, was that we defeated ISIS in Syria by ourselves. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces were key to our success in rooting out ISIS from Raqqa. In fact, last February, General Joseph Al-Votel, head of the U.S. Central Command, testified before the House Armed Services Committee and said that the SDF was, quote, "the most effective force on the ground in Syria against ISIS." I've constantly argued that there ought to be a synergy between what is moral and what is right for the United States and what is sound geostrategic policy to defend that happens to coincide usually with defending our interests. And that we've got to remember who our friends are. What happened last March when the Turks took control of the Kurdish-controlled Afrin region of Syria, northeastern Syria of Afrin, is an abject case study, of how not to behave. The Kurds shed their blood violently, fighting assets fighting ISIS and defending American interests in Raqqa. And I've got to ask, where were we when they needed us? Regrettably, we stood aside. And of course, the SDF would naturally have to prioritize and run to Afrin to fight for the survival of their own people, diverting their fighters away from the fight against the Islamic State elsewhere within Syria. What happened in Afrin, which had been a beautiful, democratic, Kurdish-controlled enclave where, as Ethan had said, egalitarianism between men and women, and as Basa had mentioned, where religious pluralism and members of all faiths had a beautiful, safe sanctuary within the chaos of Syria, was a tragedy and will forever be a blight on American history. The fall of Afrin only added to the massive numbers of the refugee crisis emanating from Syria and trying to find its way into Europe. Erdogan has been engaging in an ethnic transfer of population, replacing the Kurds with more radical Sunni Muslims. The fall of Afrin to Turkey has inevitably led to a sense of cynicism and skepticism of what exactly an alliance with the United States means. This opens up the population to alliances with other forces whose interests might not necessarily align with those of the United States. Beyond that, it's about time that we recognize that Turkey, under the increasingly brutish and tyrannical control of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is not really an American ally. There's a bone-chilling video on humanrightswatch.org that demonstrates that the Turkish government, who has said that they have, quote, an open-door policy for those fleeing Syria, it shows Turkish border guards brutally beating, torturing, and shooting Syrian men, women, and children as they try to cross the border into Turkey. Following the failed 2016 coup, Erdogan's government imposed a, quote, so-called state of emergency, dismissing, as you all know, over 150,000 government workers and arbitrarily imprisoning 64,000 more on trumped-up charges of terrorism. Over 150 journalists are behind bars, again, in trumped-up charges of terrorism, as well as professors, teachers, union workers, anyone who dares utter a syllable against Erdogan's regime. The esteemed NGO Freedom House gives Turkey one of the worst ratings in the world when it comes to journalistic freedom. The one piece of optimistic news that I can find is that there have been recent statements made by both the President's National Security Advisor, John Bolton, and James Jeffrey, the U.S. Special Representative in Syria, that we will remain in Syria until the Iranians leave. So perhaps we are there for the long haul. However, I do not believe that maintaining 2,200 troops is really sufficient. President Trump is calling up as many as 15,000 troops to patrol our southern border with Mexico. I believe that it's in our best national security interest to keep a robust military presence in northeast Syria, east of the Euphrates River, in order to control Erdogan's voracious appetite, and so that the Iranians do not see this territory as just another building block in their land bridge that they have been constructing from Tehran through Baghdad and eventually to the Mediterranean Sea. Thank you very much. That we are haunted by the specter of the last war. Americans are afraid of military engagement now. But, you know, the problem is either we show strength now or we're going to have to show more strength later. It's inevitable because nature of war is a vacuum and there are these brutish forces. And this is an ideological war for the Iranians and the Turks. Maybe not for the Russians. For the Russians, they just want to flex their muscles, as I say, and be seen as a superpower in the region. But certainly for the Iranians and the Turks, this is something ideological, and They're not going away just because we feel like changing the channel and not looking at reality there. Sometimes, you know, there need to be certain policemen in certain neighborhoods, or else the entire neighborhood would go to pot. I think Bret Stephens wrote a wonderful book about this. We just, you know, sometimes we, you know, it's not, you know, something that I can envision, you know, and it's not a politically correct answer that people love, but I would like to see a sustained, robust presence in Syria, because, you know, when the cat's away, the mice play, and some of these mice are really, really, you know, venal and mischievous and brutal. So, you know, America, I see America as President Ronald Reagan did, as the shining city on the hill, and we could be a force for what's moral and what's good. But we have to remember that we're a force and not be afraid to use it.